Thanks very much, Mike. Thanks, Jennifer, for coming over. It's great to have you. I think everyone in this room knows Bristow, or they're in the wrong room. But do you want to explain how you're balancing the company? It's changed a lot in the last few years.
Sure.
Is it on?
Thank you for having us. I'm happy to be here. Sure. So, over the last few years, 5 years ago, this month, we closed a merger between Era and Bristow, and we had a vision when we did that of what we were going to do, of where we're going to focus on our government services business. At that time, we had one government services contract with the UK Coast Guard. Since then, we have added to that with Ireland and the Netherlands and the Falkland Islands through a tuck-in purchase and the Dutch Caribbean. So really, that was part of our mission. That was part of our thought process at the time. Offshore energy was still recovering from COVID, and that now has done a lot of that recovery. So while it was a quarter of our revenues back then, and it's still a quarter of our revenues, that has more to do with what offshore energy has done over the last couple of years than what we've done on the government services side.
And you've got offshore, you've got government services, and then you have other services, which is not the most imaginative name.
Well, primarily it's an airline in Australia, in northern Australia, in Darwin. There are a few other things. We do lease out some aircraft. This is a legacy primarily from the Era side that we've done when we have aircraft that are available, because we can offer support as well as the lease. It's a little bit different than the leasing companies too.
And how should people look at your fleet planning?
I mean, we are one of the largest operators of S-92s, AW189s, and AW139s in the world, and those are the primary fleet that we have. We did take delivery of some new H135s this year for a specific customer in Africa. So we're pretty agnostic as it comes to fleet. We just happen to have a pretty large fleet in those three big models.
And your order book at the moment, what have you got coming?
We have an order for 7 AW189s in offshore configuration and options for 10 more. We haven't seen a need to exercise those options today. The 7 we already have visibility and placement for.
And historically, by Bristow standards, that's quite a small order book.
I mean, if you go way back, but as everyone in this room knows, over the last decade, there hasn't been a lot of orders at all. We put those orders in a year and a half ago as we saw that there was going to be a need in the capacity, and we seem to have been right in that.
And when we talk about offshore, still very important, a small minority is exploration and the rest is production. How are you feeling about the offshore market generally for the next couple of years?
So we did, in Q1, when we announced our financials, we did reaffirm our guidance. We put out guidance at the end of 23 for 24, 25, 26. We did affirm that guidance, so we still feel confident in where the market is going. There is a lot more uncertainty than there would have been some time ago around the oil, OPEC Plus and what they've decided to do around oil, as well as whether demand slows down if there is any sort of global recession or like that. But at least up through next year, we feel pretty confident of where we're at.
And I know that splitting it into 3 businesses makes it much easier for investors to understand and people looking at the business. But do you get many synergies between the offshore side and the government contract side?
Sure. So we just this last year-end filing split the business so you can actually see more. We used to just show the revenue split out. Now we show it down to a profitability level, which our investors are very happy to see. At one point we had one government contract, so it's kind of hard to do that. Now with a variety of them, we can do that. Yes, there is, particularly in Europe, there's a synergy around the MRO. Well, in the UK particularly, we have offshore energy and we have government services. Pilots, it's all in one AOC. We can go across that. The MRO, we can service our own. And that will also be true for our Netherlands and Ireland contracts, since we can do maintenance in country, but we can also do heavier maintenance at our facility in Aberdeen if we need to.
And if we go back to your order book, how do you decide whether to lease or own?
So there's a lot of discussions that go on that cost of capital, where things are. We have some great partners in the room that we do lease aircraft from. Lately, maybe not the order book so much, but just availability of aircraft, because capacity has been so constrained. There was a slideshow that Steve Robertson has put out several times around what the capacity looks like now. So in some of those cases,
you'll see it tomorrow as well. Yeah.
We have it in our earnings presentation every quarter these days. But some of that's availability, some of it's cost of capital, some of it has to do with the contract length. If the contract can support a lease better than us deploying our own capital, then we'll do that.
Which is your favorite lessor?
No comment.
So Bristow was a great supporter of leasing companies in the early days. I think when Milestone 15 years ago, you and, to be fair, CHC did a lot. You guys are also supporting a lot of eVTOL. Is that why?
I mean, it's the next generation, right? It's the next. It's the next generation of what we're going to do in lift. We were very interested on the aero side. Back in 2019, we did a big study on that internally, and looked at that and were very interested, but it seemed very far off, and then it didn't all of a sudden. So we've decided, since we're an air operator that has 12 AOCs around the world and can really operate globally, we thought we should be part of this discussion. So we partnered with, we've got 6 or 7 partnerships today with different OEMs. We are doing this project in Norway that starts in August called the Sandbox Project, basically partnering with the government in Norway as well as Beta Technology to just fly outside of regulation to see the commercialization of these aircraft, primarily cargo, today. So.
And do you have any idea when it will start being revenue generating for Bristow?
We'll see. I mean, if we get into 5 years from now, there's probably the start of that. We'd have some natural customers in our offshore energy customers that have much larger logistical needs than just moving people to offshore. They have parts and they have things that need to go either to ship or need to go out offshore, where there's a really good opportunity potentially to use that. They're interested because of the low carbon footprint, et cetera. So it's still a ways off. To date, we haven't put any meaningful capital into this. These are mostly just MOUs, partnerships.
And how do you choose which? Because there's no shortage of eVTOL projects.
No, there's not. We look at the management team. We look at the technology. We partnered with some folks to help us look at the technology, and then we look at the financial backing. And we've already had some that have had some trouble on the financial backing side. It's very expensive, as many of you in here know, to certify an aircraft, and that's something that some of these companies are learning. But that was part of the strategy of having many partners. We've looked at a lot more than the 6 or 7 that we partnered with, but we'll see how that all works out. Some are kind of moving farther ahead, and some are backing off. So
you'd agree that the merger of Era and Bristow has gone pretty well. It seems to from the outside. Do you see any other opportunities for consolidation, or do you see other of your competitors consolidating?
I mean, I don't think we see anything of the size of the Era-Bristow merger. We ended up generating over $60 million worth of synergies, which happened to be at a good time. We announced that merger right before COVID and closed it during COVID, which was a little rough. But There could be. There's a couple of markets, particularly, where there are a lot of different operators. The UK is one. Brazil is another place. There's always regulatory reasons, et cetera, why that might be more difficult, particularly where we're at right now. But yes, and I think consolidation is helpful in our market, just due to it's very fractured. If you think about the number of helicopter companies and how it goes from we have 200 down to pretty small pretty quickly, it makes sense to have more efficiency in that market.
Great, we've got loads. And do you have any views on lessor consolidation?
A lot of that has happened through what's happened, and I think the lessors, well, now there's some new ones, but the ones from a decade ago, are in a good spot today, and we're happy with where that is. We'll see what happens with other, but the new ones, who knows? They're all just starting, so we'll see.
Okay, we've got a few questions to run through. You've already answered own versus lease fleet. Someone's saying, all anonymous questions, Bristow is committing to sustainability. What's your motivation for that? And are you seeing any benefits or financial impact?
We look at sustainability a couple of different ways, right? There's sustainability that you do because it's the right thing to do. It's right for your stakeholders. It's right for the environment. It's right for everyone. That is just what you do because that's what you need to do, what you should do as a corporate steward. And then there is sustainability, which is more on, let's say, the eVTOL side, which would be more the business side of that. And again, today we're not generating revenue doing that, but we do see that as part of the solution going forward. So we just put out our fourth sustainability report. We continue to do that. There are other aspects of that. Financing, and a lot of times, particularly in Europe, is tied to that. We do operate in offshore energy, which makes that difficult. So some of that, is helpful to at least talk about what we're doing to be sustainable.
In fact, we've got another question saying, what disadvantages do you see in investing in oil and gas? And do you notice any price pressure due to volatility? Less than the price volatility, but are you finding it harder to find financing for offshore oil yet?
Well, the last couple of financings we've done have been for our government services, and those are different and easier to do. We've been funding our growth on the offshore energy side with cash. We are throwing off quite a bit of cash. It is a more difficult market in the offshore energy. I would say, we have an outstanding bond, U.S. traded bond. Those are less sensitive to that. They're looking at the asset values and they're trading on, it's a secured deal and they trade on the asset values. So they're not necessarily looking at the profile of what they're doing. But if you're doing a one-off asset financing, offshore energy is much harder.
Do you see, we've got so many questions, we're going to do a few. Do you see fewer termination for convenience clauses in offshore?
Yes, so over the last couple of years, we've stated this publicly several times that on average, our rates have been increasing about 25% from the trough area, but also in that has been the terms in the contracts. So less termination for convenience, or if it is, it's after a certain amount of time with some penalty, which was very different than the past, or not at all, and some other terms around indemnities, et cetera. So we have I'd say, better contract structure. It's not across the board. There are certain places where that's not that you see a lot of the people actually terminating, but you do still see that in some contracts, but a lot less than we did in the past.
Again, as one of the largest operators in offshore, if not the largest, what is the Bristow view on lessors placing large orders?
Well, I've been around since 2012, so I've seen the up and the down. We're a little cautious when we see those, just to make sure, and I know everyone's been talking about, they've been looking at it and making sure they've been thoughtful about it, but there is concern there that we end up with an oversupply like we did a decade ago, and that creates other issues. Right now, I mean, capacity is constrained. We have customers we have unmet lift demand today, where customers are sharing where they'd rather have an aircraft. So we're in a good spot, but hopefully some of these are not all going into offshore energy, and they're going to other markets as well, and that will be better.
And to be fair, you could ask about operators placing large orders as well. Here's another question from the Competition Markets Authority. How would you rate the level of competition between operators now compared to before?
I mean, I think we're all, because the market has been pretty healthy, everyone's been buoyed by that. I will say if there's, going to be pressures, it's going to be in a couple of those markets I talked about where there are more competitors, just because obviously the customers like that as well. So, but to date, in the last couple of years anyway, it's been healthy competition, but not where we were at one point where we were racing to the bottom, et cetera.
That was brilliant, thank you. You wouldn't say which was your favorite lessor. Which is the most annoying lessor to deal with?
We like all of our lessors.
Very diplomatic. Thank you so much. Thank you.